afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Jesuits. I am a second semester senior graduating this year in May. I'm a human resources management major. I'm also the current president of Society for Human Resource Management, otherwise known as SHRM, on campus. I'm really looking forward to this event today. I think it'll give me some good insights to share with my organization. And I would just like to start by saying our panel is kicking off a 2-week of 5-week program focused on giving students and the class of 2020 the chance to explore career paths, find job and internship opportunities, network with alumni, and more. Check out the website linked in the chat for more details. And don't forget, if you complete 3 items on the weekly checklist, you will be eligible for the drawing at the end of the week. The direct link to the checklist on the Imagine 21 website is also in the chat. And now I am so excited to introduce to you our panel of amazing alumni. With us first here today, we have Katie Rabent Gardiner, who is a class of 2009 Human Resources Management graduate, and also Edwin Gonzalez, who is a class of 2012 History graduate. And lastly, we have Shannon Moran, who is a class of 2018 Human Resources Management graduate. And now we are going to kind of hand it off to them. We'll start with Katie to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great, thanks so much, Christian. So yes, as Kristen mentioned, I graduated Oswego in 2009. Looking at that number, it feels so long ago, but in my head, it's not that long ago. But the number is kind of scary. And I apologize ahead of time if you hear a dog barking or kids in the background. It gets a little chaotic between 4 and 5 in my house. So just a heads up, and I'll go on mute when needed if it comes up. So we'll see what happens. But so currently I am a director for human resource management, and I work for Rich Products. So Rich Products is a family-owned food company that was founded in 1945 in Buffalo, New York. And we're so lucky in Buffalo, having, a smaller city, to have a world headquarters here. So Rich's is a global business. We have about 11,000 associates globally and growing. We're in over 100 countries. And we're about $4 billion in annual revenue. So Rich Products is like I mentioned, is a food company. So we create solutions for different food industry professionals around the world. We do anything from food service, so campus food, K through 12, education, and we also do any retail or in-store bakery, deli, and prepared foods. And we've always been a leader in toppings and icing. So that's what we're founded on, is whipped topping, believe it or not, frozen whipped topping. But today we also compete in other categories such as cakes, desserts, breads and rolls, pizzas and flatbreads, seafoods, and now we're in gluten-free and plant-based. So that's Rich Products. And prior to Rich's, I worked for Career Services. I know Gary's on the call, I mentioned that. And at Career Services, they were so helpful, first working there and then building relationships with the folks that work there, and helping to set up different career fairs. And through that, Target used to be a really big campus recruiter. I don't know if they still are, but out of college, I worked for Target in their store as a human resource manager. And following that, I did a stint in construction. I call it my millennial moment. I thought I wanted to be at this point in my career at this time. And so I'm like, if I don't get it, then I'm going to quit and make it happen. So I ended up working in construction, telling folks that worked in construction for like 40 years how to work safely with OSHA, and started their HR department. So that was fun. And then I worked for Diageo in Connecticut. Their North American headquarters, and they're a wine and spirits company. So that was a lot of fun, working for an alcohol company. And then I relocated back to Buffalo and knew this is where I want to stay and raise my family, and know I wanted to still grow in my career. And I was working remote for Diageo, and it was a little different remote then compared to right now, being able to grow your career. So I left and went to Rich Products, and have been there for a little over 5 years now. So looking forward to speaking with everyone today.
and next we'll go with Edwin.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So I did not go to school for human resources, but I did fall in love with it right out of school. So I'm going to work my way kind of from school. I did start at Stony Brook University as a human resources assistant. From there, that's where I fell in love with recruiting and, helping students find their on-campus jobs, and professors and adjunct faculty, making sure they were applying to the correct positions. Later on, I worked for Ronstadt, a staffing agency, where, again, it was mostly recruiting, and I did a full gamut of various different administrative positions. And most currently, I'm at Tweezerman International. Tweezerman International is a beauty tool company. They do everything from, obviously, tweezers to nail clippers, eyelash curlers, and they work with celebrity makeup artists. They are part of the Zwilling Beauty Group in Germany. So we do handle a lot of travel kits, a lot of manicure kits, and it's especially been booming with COVID. Everyone has to still make sure their nails and their eyebrows are done at home. So the at-home beauty routine has taken off and helped us a lot. And it is for men and women, so it is a very popular product for men and women. I've been there about 3.5 years. Similar to Katie, I do have exposure to OSHA because we are a manufacturing company, so I do run the safety committee there. And in my time at Tweezerman, I've revamped our onboarding, our recruiting process, to just make a full candidate experience a lot more enjoyable.
Thanks, Edwin, and we will go over to Shannon.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I went to Oswego and graduated in 2018. After school, I moved to Boston, Massachusetts, and that's currently where I am still. After school, I did a lot of temp roles and long-term temp positions. I started off in the tech industry. I worked at a company called Datadog. And then kind of moved into the pharmaceutical and biotech realm, which is pretty booming industry in Boston. I was a recruiting coordinator at a company called Foundation Medicine. And then after that, I moved into my role at Ultivue. I'm now the HR generalist. Ultivue is a startup life sciences company, so they're technically not a biotech company, but what they do, so we don't develop drugs. We are a company that has a platform that helps companies who do develop drugs determine whether their drugs that they are developing are working or not. So we have kits that have specific like fluorescent lighting that goes into slides that people can use to see different indicators of whether their drugs are working or not. And my company is specifically in the oncology side of things right now. So that's dealing with cancer drugs. So right now I'm the generalist for the company, and that's a little bit about me.
All right, thank you, Katie, Edwin, and Sharon. We are extremely thankful that all three of you could be here with us today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christine Mosick, SUNY Oswego's STEM and Health Care Career Coach, to get our panel started. Christine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Christian, and thank you all to our panelists. We really appreciate you being here today and sharing all of the insight with students that we're about to get into now. We have a couple of questions prepared for our panelists. In addition to that, any attendees that do have questions and would like those to be answered, please feel free to throw those in the chat We do have some folks on the call that will be able to answer career services related specific questions, alumni specific questions, and then obviously any questions for our alumni panelists we'll get to at the end of these different questions that we have here. So we'll go ahead and start. I'll have you guys go in the same order with answering. So we'll go with Katie and Edwin and Shannon. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what types of positions you hire for and what specific industries you work with.
Sure, thanks, Christine. So in thinking about this question, we hire really agnostic to industry. We hire more on discipline or profession, I would say. So we're food manufacturing at the root of it, but we have so many other functions that support that process. So while we do hire for manufacturing, food manufacturing specifically, we also hire folks for sales. We hire culinarians. So we have food products. We have to go out and show restaurants how to use our food, or work with a restaurant owner or a chef at a college campus on what products they could potentially use and how to use them. We have marketing, selling our products. So we do both business to business and big business to consumer marketing. We have the whole gamut of supply chain. So from end to end, from, customer service and logistics to global operations for supply chain, research and development. So innovation is huge, like at many other organizations. So, how do we look at our current portfolio and renovate products or create new products for our customers? In addition, we have support functions, right? We have HR, like I'm in today, IT and finance, for example. And then specifically for college students or college grads, we have internships in every one of those areas that I mentioned. In addition, for recent college grads or graduate students, we have a 2-year management training program as well. So while we are food manufacturing, we hire from many different industries. You may have a leg up or not nowadays, right? We know that having a diverse team, and when I say diversity, I also am inclusive of diversity of experiences. So we might not always want somebody with a food service background because we want a diverse set of experiences and knowledge joining the team.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, Katie, I think you and I come from very similar types of recruiting aspects in where we work. I work for a consumer products company, so we are in manufacturing. So we do hire a lot of the same type of positions, and the industries that we hire from, we tend to look for related because they all can be comparable, such as fashion. Somebody from food manufacturing would definitely be relatable to us. And I think the types of positions for us have been growing so much more recently, specifically given in marketing. Our digital content creation team has grown. Our web marketing team has grown. Our e-commerce team has grown. And our e-commerce team, unlike most other companies, falls under our marketing department. So those are the type of positions I hire for. Customer service, finance, IT, those similar support roles, I think, are definitely relatable. We do have internships, and they do typically fall into our finance and our marketing team, just because they are the biggest teams, and they have the most bandwidth to be able to coach and teach those young professionals.
Yeah, so my company, I guess, is a little bit different, especially on the science part of thing. There's very specific hard skills that some people need, especially if we're looking for scientists. We're looking for people with immunohistochemistry background. It's a pretty fancy word, but we need people who can understand slides and look at slides of specific tissues and understand how to read them and what they're looking for. So those roles are pretty interesting. I don't have a science background, so I find it really interesting looking at resumes of people who are scientists for my company, pretty impressive resumes. But we also have supporting roles where you don't have to have the specific industry experience, I guess. If you want to be in sales, we support sales roles and finance roles, marketing, like the basic business, but a big chunk of what we do is scientists and research positions, and more of the entry level would be like lab tech positions and research assistants, things like that.
Yeah, and I would just second what Edwin said. With COVID, there has definitely been an acceleration in our digital marketing and e-commerce as well. So our company says, they really were forced to leap forward years and years. So I'm really happy you mentioned that, and same thing happening at our organization.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for sharing that information. Sounds like lots of different opportunities, especially with, the direct roles that maybe relate to the function of your company, but also those support roles as well. So that's great for our students to hear. All right. So our next question is, what are the top skills and abilities you look for when hiring individuals for your organization?
Sure. So yeah, I reflected on this and I tried to narrow it down, and because some skills and abilities are, specific to the role that we're hiring for, but just taking a step back and looking at the landscape and the environment and the pace of our business right now, a couple of things stood out in my mind. The first being adaptability. The quality of being able to adjust to new conditions, right? And it's been so hard, right? Life has turned upside down, and not only personal life, but work life for many people has turned upside down. So how adaptable are you to changing environments? And even prior to COVID, there's so much conversation around the pace of change is just getting faster and faster and faster. And how are you able to stay ahead of that, to plan and strategize and get ahead of that pace? So adaptability was a big one. Secondarily is prioritization. And so we know the definition of prioritization is understanding, the importance of what to work on. But then the ability to constantly rebalance that because of the pace of change is something that would be really important to be successful. And the third one I thought of was collaboration. So a lot of organizations, or ours specifically, is flattening. So there's fewer levels, there's more networked versus hierarchical relationships. So in that environment, you need to be able to work across diverse groups. So say you're in research and development, you need to work with those that do marketing, right? Or sales, or understand their world. And you also have to be able to work across levels. So you have to be able to work with a vice president if you're entry level, and or if you're in a technical role and somebody doesn't understand that technical role. Say, for example, we're talking about scientists, if you're a food scientist, are you going to be able to conversate and influence somebody who is in sales or marketing? So collaboration was a big one. And then as we globalize, too many organizations are global. So how do you work across cultures in a collaborative way? The fourth was growth potential. And with this, I think this one might be somewhat dependent on the role, but I would say in a majority of roles, we look for a candidate that has career aspirations and really testing their promotability. So can they grow within our organization if we're hiring them in? And with that, how quickly can they learn? the technical skills in a job, you'll learn that, but like how quick will that learning curve be? Or how short will that learning curve be, and how would they be able to understand, how quickly will they be able to understand the total picture of the organization? Because that's when they really can grow understanding just beyond their role, but how does the total organization and business work? And then emotional intelligence is a big one. How well do they operate within the organization or interacting with others? Everything is pretty much in a team setting for the most part in our organization, and how well do they navigate that is part of that growth potential. The fifth and final skill that made my list was culture add. And I don't know if this is unique to our organization or not, but I think it's also really important when you're interviewing to test this, to make sure the organization's a good fit for you. And it's understanding what the company values and understanding what the workplace culture is and making sure that's in alignment with you. We're looking at that when we interview, but I think it's really important because you're there all day, every day. So you want to make sure you're proud of where you work. So while you're also, being able to fit into that new culture, it's also important to speak up and add diversity and knowledge to contribute to that culture. So that was the fifth thing I thought of when you look at it holistically. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Katie. Edwin, we'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
That's a hard follow-up. Those are all great points. I got to say, I do want to start off by saying that culture add is definitely important because an interview, and I may be jumping ahead here a little bit, is definitely both ways. You want to make sure that you align with the company and its vision and, again, some of those values that the company holds. So I thought that was a great point to add. I'm going to narrow mine down to 3. And, when I was thinking about this question, it gets harder and harder. And maybe Shannon and Katie want to add some input as to how do you get those skills or how do you tell those skills from a candidate's resume alone? Because that's always the first impression. But what I look for, and I have to agree with Katie, is prioritization. I tend to ask a lot of task-oriented questions and how they can communicate their prioritization and maybe some of their independence when given those tasks. That's something I look for. With that hand in hand is, I think, problem resolution. Sometimes when prioritizing or given too many tasks, you can run into problems. So I always tend to look for how does someone handle a problem that arises in the workplace, no matter how big, how small. What was their root cause analysis? What was their track for finding help, if any? That's kind of one of mine. And then at the end, I like to really analyze their communication. Being that it's so digital now, we're doing Zoom meetings, or in my case, Microsoft Teams meetings. How is their communication coming across? Everyone can always improve in communication. I know myself. So that's one of the things I look for, and seeing how they articulate themselves. And even from their first resume impression, is it not an eyesore? Is it aesthetically pleasing, what they put on the resume? Those are just some of the quick initial things that I tend to look for.
Awesome. Thanks, Edwin. And Shannon, will hand it over to you.
Yeah, I also had juggling priorities on my list, but I did kind of want to point to, you want to be able to prioritize, but if things are going in different directions, you want to be able to pivot and switch gears and kind of take that in stride and not kind of get flustered. I think things are changing so fast nowadays, and there's going to be competing priorities, and it's just how do you jump from one to the next and know what to focus on and what not. But I also wanted to bring up having a good attitude for candidates, and I guess to dive deeper on that of like, are you able to wear many hats? You know, you have this one role has its specific things, but can you do other things? And if you can do other things, it's more, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to jump in and help out if my office coordinator who sits at the front desk isn't there that day? Am I willing to sit at the front desk and help out with the company in that manner? You know, being able to do more than just your day-to-day tasks, I think will go a long way, and people will see that you are, you know, doing more than what's asked of you for your specific role, and you're helping out and you're really being that team player.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Those are really amazing skills and qualities across the board. So thank you so much. That was extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I would just say, Christine, and like these are evolving, ever evolving. Like the world is changing so much in front of us. And I think it's always important for whatever discipline or, you know, industry folks, you know, gravitate towards or begin working in, is to understanding what are those emerging skills in that industry and educate yourself. Don't wait for somebody to come and educate you. Go and seek it out. When college ends, you know, you're not given that anymore. And yes, some employers will provide that. But especially when it comes to emerging skills, you always need to stay relevant and continue skilling yourself. So, well, what we said today exists today. That's not a static list. It's going to change like in the next 6 months, perhaps. So always just keep an eye out on that emerging skill list, you know, to do well in your career and stay ahead.
Katie, I love that point. Thank you so much for making that too, because it is important for, you know, students and just individuals that are job seekers in general to understand the position in the industry that they're going into. And a lot of that is understanding, you know, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they need. Fortunately and unfortunately, our world is ever adapting and those needs change a lot. So staying up to date on that information is really important. So I'm glad you made that point as well. All right, our attendees, feel free to keep throwing questions either in the chat or the Q&A in the webinar. I'm collecting them and we'll get to them at the end, but I've seen some really good ones so far, so please continue to do that. And we'll continue to move on to the next question that we have here. All right, so the next question that we have here is more about kind of candidates. So given two candidates that have the same qualifications, what helps set those applicants kind of apart with the format and the content specifically of their documents? So thinking about thinking about a resume and a cover letter or any of the other documents that they're providing as part of their application, and how do you make that final decision of who you're gonna hire?
Sure. So with the resume, I think what filters out during the review process was how aligned are the person who's applying their experiences with the key responsibilities of the role. And then if you're between two candidates, I think a manager would step back and say, looking at their team holistically, how does one candidate fit over the other into adding knowledge or experiences if it's a team setting? So it's obviously hypothetical, but I could see that happening. So I think it's important to have a diverse set of experiences that potentially could separate one person over the other, perhaps, to bring that into the team or enhance the team. And then I think in terms of formatting or content of the document, I think it's it's a no-brainer. It really has to be perfect and look really good. Career Services does an amazing job. A couple of current students or recent alumni will reach out, and I always tell them to go back to Career Services. They're so helpful with that process, because you really do need to have a couple set of eyes on it to make sure you're catching everything on there and the formatting looks good, because that's really what filters in, and that's on the hiring manager's desk when they're talking to you. So you want it to be a really good impression and reflection of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Edwin, what do you have to add?
One, I wish I took more advantage of Career Services while I was on campus. I do regret not doing that. Number two, I think first and foremost, and this may be subjective to every recruiter, but aesthetic to the eyes is very important. If it just looks like I'm reading a book on a resume, I'm going to probably tend to put that one to the side for now. I won't say no right away, because I do give it a chance, and I'll say, hey, you know what is in this that has so much information, but it definitely gets put to the back of the pile. And that's first and foremost. Your information needs to be clear and concise. And I think between two candidates, if you had, 10s across the board on the resume and the information, I think one of the things I look for is what is the impact they had while they were in their position, as opposed to handling financial transactions or, process so many files. Did you create a new filing system? Did you improve on a process? I think that's one of the things I look for most. And I think that's, again, like Katie said, one of the most emerging things that's happening on resumes is people are realizing you don't just put what you did, but you put the impact you had at that company. And I think it varies for various different levels. If we're talking about entry level and recent graduates, one of the things I think I look for is the jobs that you had, are they relatable in any way towards your major or the position you're applying to, right? It's tough to say a lifeguard is really realistically related to being an HR manager, but with that being said, were you busy during your time off, or were you just enjoying summer? Were you taking some summer courses? Were you taking some winter courses, or or working and saving money, whatever the case may be? I think that's super important. It shows a lot about how you're consuming your time and responsibility.
Awesome. Thanks, Edwin. And Shannon.
Yeah, I would make sure that you're tailoring your resumes towards the position and the company that you're applying for. And I mean, it doesn't have to be anything outrageous, but if you have your 3 bullet points under something that you did, whether it was an internship, let's say, and the company is looking to see if you're doing a front desk role and they want to make sure that you have decent communication skills, and that's one of your bullet points, maybe if that's really one of the things that job description is focusing on, change that and make that your first bullet point instead of just saying, oh, well, it's in my resume. You really want to highlight that and make sure that that's something that someone reviewing your resume sees. So just making sure that you're maybe matching words that they have in the job description to what you have in your resume, kind of using those combined buzzwords, I guess, like the action words that you put on your resume, to make sure that they're fitting the role. And then don't be afraid, you don't have to have your one resume and that's what you're going to put out to everyone. Feel free to tailor each resume to each role, and kind of go from there so that you seem more appealing to that company.
Yeah, if I could piggyback off of that, you mentioned something about the cover letter. In my opinion, and I had this come up at a different panel I was a part of, the cover letter is maybe a little antiquated, but if you do submit a cover letter, and maybe Katie and Shannon want to speak on this, I can definitely sometimes tell when it's definitely sometimes, excuse me. I can definitely tell when it's a template and you're just replacing the company name, the person you're directing it to. Make it more tailored. Just like you tailor your resume, if you're going to create a cover letter and you're going to take the time to send one in, tailor that cover letter. Reference back that posting, how Katie said, if we're looking for X, Y, and Z in the job posting, make sure your cover letter resembles that just like your resume does. Because sometimes your resume may not actually speak as much as you can in that cover letter.
Yeah, and I would also build on that, Edwin and Shannon. I think I'm not a recruiter, but I think there's recruitment technology that filters resumes to match keywords to the job posting to the resume and or cover letter. So that technology exists, and I know organizations use that. So just keep that in mind as you're tailoring your resume and just emphasizing the importance of that, especially with the technology available now.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So we have a couple questions here. We do have more kind of panel questions, but we do have a couple questions here that relate to the last question where we were talking about kind of qualities and skills. And then we also have some questions specific to kind of resumes and documents. So we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and kind of focus on those, and then we'll get back to the other panel questions. So a panel or attendee had asked about an aesthetically pleasing resume. They've heard that it's important to be straightforward with a resume formatting because they're increasingly read by algorithms. Katie, as you were kind of mentioning, the probably applicant tracking systems. Do either of you or do any of you guys have insight about applicant tracking systems? Any insight about the resume and the formatting? Do any of your companies use these type of systems where there are matching words or as they're looking for those things?
Yeah, I can jump in here. We do use an ATS, an applicant tracking system, and over the last year, it's built out more algorithms. It'll actually tell me on a rating scale of whether great or perfect, great, good, bad, whether the applicant's resume does match my job posting. When it comes to that, I think just like Katie said, using those similar keywords and those words that are used in the job posting is your best bet when applying to a job. And again, how Shannon said, tailoring your resume to each job posting as time consuming as it can be. And believe me, I know it's definitely worth it. As a recent grad, you're probably throwing hundreds of resumes out and maybe getting one call, if that. Your chances are more likely to increase the more you tailor it and the more you make it job specific and position specific.
Thank you, Edwin. Katie and Shannon, do you guys use applicant tracking systems at all?
At Riches, we do use them, but I'm not close enough to it. We have a team, a recruitment team that does that. So I know the technology exists. I just not sure how the ins and out of it. Like Edwin has that line of sight.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with Katie. We do have an applicant tracking system, but we are startup, so it's pretty basic, I guess. So it is a lot of our recruiters going in and looking at the resumes, but it's definitely like the first search that look through that recruiters are looking at it. It's a quick look through. So you want to make sure that you're really highlighting those similarities that would make you a good fit for the role, put them at the top, or, make them the first bullet point of, each aspect of your resume. It'll definitely help.
Awesome. Just curious, we've heard this kind of as active career services professionals, whether you have been in a recruiting role at one point or you've worked either your recruiting team, can you give our students and our individuals that are attending a sense of how long you actually take to look at a resume or a cover letter per each applicant? You could give us kind of like a gut reaction.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the role. Edwin, you're smiling. Maybe you want to comment first. Let me hear what you have to say.
So the reason I got hired in my position was because I come from a staffing agency. Recruiting is what I did all day, every day. Again, revamping our onboarding process and new hire recruitment to make it a 360 round tables. My forte here, my pat on my back. Realistically, if a resume is unesthetically appealing in the first 10 seconds, it's going to the bottom of the pile. And I think it does depend on the position. If I'm recruiting for an HR director and there's somebody who comes from a financial background, I'm probably going to put that off to the side. I'll look at the positions first. And I think recruiting is subjective to the recruiter. So they can look at various different things first. Like I look at the job positions before I look at the name or anything else. I look at the history and things like that, but it could be anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds before I pass or keep reading.
Katie or Shannon, anything to add to that?
Not necessarily for me. I would agree with Edwin. It's quicker than you want it to be, but you're looking for those specific qualifications that you need first, and then you're kind of diving in deeper from there on the resume.
Yeah, in my point of view now, Edwin has much deeper experience on this, but when I get is usually like the top few resumes to review, I look at them pretty closely, and I think that's when you spend more time with it. And when it gets to, final round, you are kind of like reading it line by line. So there's where you want it to like look and sound really good, because yes, there's an initial pass through, but know that all that work doesn't go to waste, because before I go in to interview somebody, I'm really referring to that and reading through that resume in preparation for that discussion. So while there's the blood, sweat, and tears, it's, you got to get through the door, and then the hard work pays off when you get that interview.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We have another question here that has to do kind of with skills and abilities, just general qualifications that you look for. So one of the questions that a attendee asked was, would you say recruiters today focus more on involvement and experience in a respective field, or high grades when looking at potential candidates? So kind of this question of GPA and high grades versus experience.
Yeah, Shannon, I'd be interested to know, because you work with a lot of scientists. I think your answer might be unique. I'd be interested in your perspective at your company.
Yeah, so I want to say it's a combination of both, especially for the scientists. I don't know if we're necessarily, especially for some people who are far out from school, don't necessarily keep their GPA on a resume per se, but there are a lot of, you look for scientific articles and things like that gets included on people's resumes. So if there is someone who's applying for a scientist role and they don't really have any research that they're doing or articles, that's not necessarily a red flag, but it kind of poses questions like, are you involved? Do you want to learn more, kind of thing? So I think from there, yes, it is important to stay educated and involved, but I think for other roles too, we definitely want to make sure that the person is well-rounded overall. So I think it's a good mixture of both. You don't have to be the smartest person out there, but you don't have to be like the most involved person either. I think it's just finding that balance. And for a personal perspective, if you're maybe not the highest in your class, but if you can tailor to make sure that you can explain that you have a little bit of each and you have something to offer the company, then I think that's more the important part.
That's a fabulous answer, Shannon. Thank you so much. I think the mixture of both is always good. And, we do get questions as career services staff members of, well, is it a 4.0 with no experience? Is it a mixture of both? Is it heavy experience with a lower GPA? So I think that that's definitely helpful. Katie and Edwin, do you guys have anything to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I would say with, as you progress in your career, it's not something that we look at. We look at more of the degree type and level of degree, continuing your education or not beyond bachelor's, and what was your degree in, and then how does that relate to your experience. But coming out right out of college, I would be interested to know that, but I probably would only put it on if I had a good GPA. I don't think I'd put it on if it was not so good of a GPA. I would probably omit that and just, see what happens. But I think coming out of school, it'd be interesting to see that as somebody, being hired into an organization. So show it off as a good one. But I would probably, for the most part, prioritize the experience and over the GPA.
Edwin, did you want to add anything?
No, not really much to add between Katie and Shannon. Being well-rounded, it's not always about the grade. So I think I agree with both of what they said.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we've talked a little bit about application materials, and we had a question come in about interviewing, and kind of after you've gotten through the application stage and you're invited for an interview. One of our attendees asked, are there any qualities or habits you look for in the behavior of those who come in for an interview? Are there behaviors that are kind of big red flags when you're interviewing individuals? We'll go ahead and start with Katie, if you guys have some ideas about this.
Sure. So I think a few of these will be obvious to everyone, but I'll go ahead and state them. So I think being on time is really important. Your attitude. I know Shannon earlier talked about attitude. So here you're in person. So how do you present yourself and how do you show up and engage with everybody you're interviewing with? And here's a big part of that culture ad comes in when you go into interview. So at the same time, you're testing the organization to make sure it's somewhere where you want to work. They're also looking to see how you engage with those that you're interviewing with that day. How do you dress? I think dressing professionally, I guess it depends on the setting, but being in a corporate setting, in my current role, I think it's really important to dress professionally. So I think those are the three things that stand out to me when somebody's coming in.
Edwin.
I think punctuality is probably my top thing. And it's, again, one of those givens. But we definitely communicate before your interview. So even if I can't get a phone call saying, hi, I'm running a little bit late, which, if you're going to the interview and you have the chance to maybe drive by, see what the parking is like, depending on where it is, I definitely suggest that. Knowing your route on the way there, that way the morning of, you're not saying I got lost. That's definitely a big one for me. In terms of in the interview, I try and look as best as I can for authenticity, not someone just answering what I want to hear, but just really being authentic. And, if I have a question where they need a minute to think about it because they can't think of an example right off the top of their head, and they say, you know what, that's a great question. Can I have a moment? I really respect that. And I really appreciate it because they're not just giving me any tabled answer that I want to hear. So I think authenticity and punctuality are probably the first two things during the interview.
Awesome. Shannon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think being authentic is really important. I know for me, I tend to be a little bit on the shyer side when interviewing. And I know a lot of feedback that I was getting at one point was that it didn't seem like I wanted the role. And to me, I was like, I'm not this overly bubbly person. How do I show my interest? And I think it was really learning how to, specifically say, like, I'm excited to have this role. I want this role because of whatever it is, and really making sure that you're saying those things, because you don't need to be this overly bubbly person in order to get the role. Like you can show that you're excited without being overly joyed about it. If you're that outgoing person, that's great. Then, work that to your advantage. But if you're not, just remember to say, I'm very thankful to be here. Like, this is why I want the role. This is why this company is exciting to me, and kind of go from there.
Awesome, thank you. Kind of going still with this interviewing question, we had another question pop in that's I think really important for our students here, because this is something that I see a lot as a career coach. Interviewing can be extremely nerve-provoking. How do you get past that initial nervous part of the interview process? And I'll even add to that, as we've talked about in authenticity, how do you make sure that you're able to be your authentic self while kind of getting over those nerves?
I think I'll jump in here. Ladies don't mind. I think one of the things that's important when interviewing is practicing. Try and take practice interviews. Go on interviews for maybe a job you really don't want, because that'll typically ease the nerves. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Another thing to remember is the people on the other side are people too. You're interviewing us as much as we are interviewing you. And I think that's important to remember. And that's really it. It's just, it should be more conversational, and that's what we try to practice. So for Shannon saying, she's a shy person, if I get that right out the gate, I will actually take a time out from the interview questions, say, Shannon, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do on your free time? What clubs were you part of in college? Are they not on your resume? So to kind of ease that interview process. So if you find yourself in a position like that, that's great. Otherwise, again, just try and remember everyone's a person, and practice makes perfect.
Awesome.
I really like that point, Edwin, and I that's what came to mind is, the company that you're interviewing for, if they're able to pick up on that and put you at ease, that says something louder than walking in somewhere and somebody's still drilling you, and when you're walking in kind of nervous. So I think that's really important, a really important point, and something to be aware of when you're interviewing. I think the other thing that I remember, I don't know if this is still offered, Christine, you'll have to let me know, at Career Services, they used to do mock interviews and video recording. And I remember that was so nerve-wracking and getting that feedback, but I legit think that's how I got my first job, is going through that painful process to really help get out the jitters. And then something that I just was helping a recent grad from Oswego on, and she said it helped. She gave me feedback that it helped, was to prepare 3 to 5 stories that you can apply to multiple questions, and using the behavioral-based interviewing process. So writing a story that's a little bit about the situation, what you did, who was involved, and what the outcome was, and write those 3 parts of the story and come up with 3 to 5 scenarios and practice those and just learn those stories that you're really proud of. And then you could walk in, you're not going to know what questions are going to be asked, but you have some scenarios to walk in to apply and just modify a bit based on the question. So she just said that helped her. So just wanted to pass that along.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And Katie, yes, we still help with mock interviews and can set up recording sessions and all of that fun thing. So any students that are attending on the call that are nervous about that authenticity, or though, practicing those mock interviews, we also can help you kind of brainstorm some short stories, as we like to call them, based off your experience and whatnot, as Katie was just speaking. Shannon, did you want to add anything to that question?
I pretty much agree with both of you guys. I think it's really important to practice. I even would write down questions and write down answers. I kept like a Google Doc and would always like change them and just kind of review it, and take the time to practice. Ask someone if they can ask you questions so you can practice answering those questions. I think it's really important. And a lot of the questions that you are going to get are going to be behavioral just because you don't have that much on the job experience yet. So just reviewing those before and taking the time, like it's a lot of time to try to, practice for interviews and things, but it's really worth it. It really helps getting rid of those first bit of jitters when you are going to your first interview.
Awesome, thanks. And yes, for our attendees or students that are on the call, if you're not sure what the STAR method is and how to answer behavioral style interview questions, definitely come see us because that's something that we can help with. As I can attest, probably everyone, all of our alumni on the call today look for, some information, but also information about the action you took and the result of that example that you're giving. So we have two more questions that I'd really like to get into. Panelists, it's okay if we run over a few minutes. Anyone have to jump out? Okay, awesome. So this next question was one that came through the chat as well. Kind of more of a statement to kind of react to the other question, but they're looking for political research jobs, and they notice that a lot of entry-level jobs or internships even encourage having experience, and a lot of the internships even almost require them to have experience. But the whole point of getting an internship is to gain experience, so they're kind of identifying this catch-22 problem. What recommendations and what tips do you have for students that may find themselves in this situation? Free grabs for anyone that wants to answer first.
Yeah, I think in those scenarios, we're specific about the degree. At that point with an internship without the experience, we look for the degree and its affiliation to the role, and are they going to be able to do the work? I think you mentioned finance. Finance is just coming to mind. Does somebody have an accounting? Are they working on an accounting degree? And okay, then they, have the wherewithal to do the work. So maybe, I don't know if you're looking I'm sure this person, at that avenue already, but looking for the specific degree requirement and starting there to see if there's any opportunity.
Edwin and Shannon, do you guys want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I remember that was always one of the hardest things after college, right? Like, 1 to 2 years of experience, entry-level position. So it is really tough. I would have to agree with Katie. How does your resume apply to the position, even when you don't have any experience? Are you highlighting your coursework? Are you I think that's when your GPA would definitely come into play. And again, that's probably when I would actually take the time to read a cover letter for an internship that requires experience. What are you highlighting in your cover letter? And again, like I mentioned before, recruiting sometimes can be very subjective. So again, for an internship, it's definitely so many different variables as to what are you going to gain out of this position as opposed to what are we going to gain.
Awesome. Thank you, Edwin.
Yeah, I agree with both of them, and don't ever let that deter you from applying. Like, just apply. You can't hurt, Sometimes I think places put that, but that's not a hard yes or no. If someone likes your background, even though it might not match up perfectly, they're going to take a chance and call you and find out more about you. So don't ever let the specific requirements deter you from applying to a job.
And I think if there are some experience requirements, focusing back on the question that we asked earlier about the skills and the qualities and the abilities, making sure that you are including those, tailoring your resume to show those different skills and abilities, and maybe in your cover letter, highlighting some of the transferable skills and the experiences that you do have that would allow you to be successful in this internship, even if you don't have maybe the base, requirement that they're looking for.
Christine, the only other build I would have is work your network. Talk to your neighbors. We're all stuck at home, right? Where do your neighbors work? Who do they know? Who do your parents know? Siblings, friends, and help them get your name out there. because referral, I don't know, I like your little dog being up in the background. You'll see my kids soon, like I mentioned. But work your network too to help advocate for you, at least for an informational interview. I've seen a lot of internships, people just get conversations going that way. It's different parents that, I mean, I worked for a family-owned business, so it's maybe a little different, but see how you can work your network to at least get a conversation with the recruiter.
Awesome. And we will go ahead and transition to our last question before I hand it over to Christian to kind of end us up. So what final tips and recommendations do you have for students on how they can, create standout application materials, and also just how they can make sure that they, as a candidate in the future, stick apart from their peers when applying for the positions that they're interested in? Anyone want to start?
I'll start this one off. Just to go off what Shannon and Katie said, leverage your network. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they can say is no. It's like asking for help. Hey, can I get a ride? No, I can't do it. Okay, so then that's it. That's all you're asking for is a ride to the interview. Just like Shannon said, apply to the job. You have nothing to lose at this point. You're trying just as much as everyone else is trying, and as cliche as it is, you're missing the shot you don't take. In regards to making standout material, try and make your resume as unique as possible. Try not to have any filler information. Something as small as typing out your whole address at the top of a resume probably isn't necessary. Town and state will suffice. And then again, what impacts did you have on the job? What relevant coursework did you take for recent graduates? And then probably my one and final personal tip I have is don't be afraid to move for a job. If you really want a job, you really want to kickstart it, your life off, go for it. Similar to Shannon, I moved to Boston and I applied to Sam Adams Beer Company. That was the dream to work right out of college, but I moved, it didn't work out. I came home, and that's the same thing with applying. You try, and if you get the job, great. If you don't, you just keep going at it. Don't dwell on the losses.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Edwin. I agree with everything you've said. The only tip I can add, or something that's helped me over the years when applying for new jobs, is leveraging, once you pass the application process, really leverage that relationship with the recruiter. They're meeting with the hiring manager and know exactly what that hiring manager is looking for. So that recruiter has always become my best friend and getting some inside tips on some buzzwords or hot topics with that hiring manager. So something that I'll pass along that's I think really helped me when getting new jobs is talking to that recruiter, and the recruiter's in a position that debriefs on all the candidates. So depending on the relationship you make with them, it might give you a little leg up too. So I want to pass that along.
I would just add, if you are being emailed if you submitted a resume and you're being emailed for an interview and things like that, make sure your email is still in a formal format. Even if the recruiter is being more relaxed with it, you make sure you're spelling out the words and putting complete words and complete sentences. I think it'll go a long way to show that you are mature and professional, especially because you are you're going to be joining as a more entry-level role. I think it'll really help, and it shows the matureness of your emails, even though the other person might be a little bit more relaxed. I think it definitely helps. And that all goes back to the hiring managers too, of how you are communicating. I think it's really important to be professional in your communication.
To add on that, Shannon, I know one of the tools I use now when recruiting, and even started over the last year or so, was texting. I get a lot more response rate. So I take the time to make sure my texting is nice, professional, almost just like an email. If you happen to come across a recruiter who does that, make sure your text comes across professional and just as thought out as Shannon just said, because the last thing we want to hear is or read is TY for reaching out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Extremely helpful information. I think our students and our attendees are going to be very happy they attended this session and joined us today. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to our 3 alumni panelists. It was really insightful, the information that you shared with our students today. Shameless plug for career services for the students and the attendees. I think our panelists have echoed that enough, but tailoring resumes, helping with content so that you're seeing that impact and that achievement in those bullet points, helping, do I put the GPA on the resume, do I not, mock interviews, all of those other things are things that we can help with. So please find us. You can go to our webpage and find information on how you can access our virtual resource center throughout the year, or also make an appointment with a career coach. And to kind of really finalize things up, I'll say thank you again to our panelists, and I'm going to hand it over to Christian to end out the session.
Thank you, Christine. And as you mentioned, I really appreciate, and I can speak for everyone here, the attendees and everyone else who's participating. Thank you so much. And your perspectives and tips and insights were very, very helpful. And I really think this program has helped everyone attending. A quick programming note, if you will. If you're thinking graduate school, maybe in your future at some point, feel free to join us tomorrow night for our 10 things you need to know about graduate school, but we're afraid to ask. This session is hosted by our own graduate studies team. The link to the session, as well as the rest of the programs, is included in the chat. We hope to see you at another session again. Thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone has a great night.